as you love, you will see me in the stars. As you look up at the stars, I will be there.
I'm Monica Charette, and this is Holding the Light.
As long as you love, I will whisper in your ear. Little whispers you will hear. As long as you love.
Imagine for a moment rushing to a hospital after learning your child has been in an accident, only to discover that there's no chance for their survival. Helen Beesley has lived this nightmare and shares the decision her family made to allow their daughter Candace to become an organ donor. I can still hear the words she read from a letter received by one of the organ recipients. How can it be that the worst day of your life can be the best day of mine? This is a powerful conversation about how a young woman's legacy of giving continues eternally through her final gift of life. We're glad you're here, because today, Colby and I are holding the light with Helen Beesley. Hi, Helen.
Hi.
Hi, it's so nice to finally put a face to your name. Helen and I were introduced, like many people, in my more recent circle of friends in the club no parent wishes to belong to. And up until today, we have only communicated really online.
Right.
So welcome and thank you for your trust. And I'm glad you're here to share your story and that of your beautiful daughter, Candace.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So it's been over 17 years since your daughter died.
Yep.
I mean, does that even seem possible? Or does it feel like just yesterday to you?
Yeah, it depends on the day. You know, some days it seems like it's been forever, and then other days it seems like it was, an hour ago. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, grief has a way of making time very unclear, doesn't it? We
Mhm.
tend to timestamp events as, or at least we do, is when Cass was here and after Cass passed. I mean, you probably do the same thing.
Right. Before and the after. Yeah.
Yeah. We want to give you a chance to share Candace's story, of course, her life and her legacy, which includes the brave decision you and your family made that allowed your daughter to be an organ donor. So we'll get to that. But if you can, tell us about that day in January, where you were and how you received the news of the accident.
Sure. So I was teaching 5th grade at Windsor Elementary School. I'd been a teacher there for many, many years. And we had just added on a new section to the school. So they were just opening up the gym and we were getting ready to go for a celebration. And we were walking over to the gym and it was about 9 o'clock in the morning. And I had this really freaky feeling come over me. It was I don't even know how to describe it, but it was intense worry. But as a parent of 4 or a parent of 2, you live that's sort of your life, but it was just very bizarre, and, one of the parents was visiting, and I knew that she was a big prayer, and I don't know why, but I looked at her and I said, I just feel like I need you to pray for Candace today." And, Candace had recently been chosen to go as a missionary to work in an AIDS hospital in Madagascar. So in my head, I'm thinking that's what I'm worried about because I'm like, "You're not going to Africa. What are you thinking about going to Africa? You're gonna, this is what I said at the time. You're gonna die if you go to Africa. You're gonna get AIDS. Little did I know that she'd die 6 miles from home. As a parent, we see these adventures and we worry about it, but so many times our children are doing something like your daughter did, something perfectly normal right at home, and we worry about these other things. And so these kinds of accidents, I think, take us by such horrific surprise because never in our dreams do we expect that. We expect something else, but not that. And so had just gotten to the gym, and within 30 minutes, I got a phone call from the office, and it was my husband. And he said, "There's been an accident. You need to come." And I knew. I, I don't know how I knew, but I knew. So I was in Windsor, she was in Farmington. She had been driving, she was a social worker, and she was on her way to meet a parent, and she hit slush. It was a January 10th, so it was like one of those days where it had snowed and there was slush, and, she just hit the slush on Route 2 and spun the car around and went into the other lane, and the other driver T-boned her, and so Farmington Hospital was too small, so they took her to Central Maine, in
Mm.
Lewiston. So we had to drive there, and the school secretary took me to meet my husband in Augusta, and all the way I said, "She's not there anymore." I just
Really?
and she's like, "Oh, no, 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 she is." I'm like, "No, she's not." And, we picked up my oldest daughter, Rebecca, and went to Central Maine, and I remember sitting in the truck, and I did not wanna get out of the truck. And my husband's like, "You gotta get out of the truck," and I go, "I'm not getting
Mm.
out." He goes, "Well, I'll get out and I'll go find out and I'll come back." And then I'm like, "I can't do that." And I said, "I can tell you right now, if I get out of the truck and we go into the hospital and they say, 'We're gonna take you to this small room,' I'm gonna
Yeah.
lose it because they only take you to the small room when it's not good." And we walk in and they go, "We need to take you over to this little
Mm.
room." And, for me, that was it, like, I knew her husband, that day was their 6-month wedding anniversary to the date, and that's she was running late because they had had breakfast. So her husband was already there. They came in and they said they had just gotten Candace had just arrived there, and the brain surgeon came in, the neurologist, and he said, "She has suffered a catastrophic, irreversible brain injury." So at that moment, I knew, but my husband and my son-in-law were like, "Okay, what do we do
Mhm.
next? What's the next step? Let's move on." As men, and I think Colby would probably agree with this, as men tend to do sometimes, I don't mean to be sexist about this, but, "Okay, what's the next step? Let's move on. What do we gotta do here?"
Let's
And
fix it.
yeah, let's fix this, we can fix this. And so, the doctor's like, "Well, she's lost her spleen. We're gonna go in and do some surgery." And so then, like my husband kept saying, "So when you do all that, she's gonna be fine." And I'm like, "Catastrophic." So we ended up, we were there that day. Luckily, we had really good friends who made phone calls. And so the hospital was full of all of our relatives, all of our friends. So I guess the one positive thing about it was everybody who wanted to, that was in state, had a chance to come and say goodbye. Unfortunately, my second daughter, Melissa, was pregnant and living in Missouri and had to get on a plane and fly, and she was a nurse, so she knew the social worker was talking to her by phone, so she knew both medically, and emotionally, and you're on a plane pregnant and, for her, she never got to say goodbye because by the time she got in that night, we were already home and it was just crazy. And I think too for, siblings, I always say that they are the forgotten grievers because people send cards, they send them to us. People say they're sorry, they say it to us. I don't know if Colby went through this, but I know for my daughters and my son, they never complained about it, but I saw it and I see it, and now I see it in other folks' children. So I always try to send cards or something to the siblings because that's a weird thing too to lose a sibling young. It's very, very hard.
That's a great idea, actually, that you mentioned that, to
Yeah,
share that
Yeah.
with other
yeah,
people, that you, um, not just ask about them, but you actually sent something to them. I think that's pretty
Right.
right.
amazing.
Yeah. Don't just put "and family" because they don't, as my daughter said, we never get to open up the mail. You grab it because I mean, I was like,
Mhm.
for days, like I gotta open it all up. And well, now you can look at it. But when it comes specially to Colby or especially to my children, it says, "I care about you personally. I care about your grief, Colby. I care about what you're going through." So those things that you learn the hard way. So they did the surgery. The surgery for what they had to do worked. And at that point, she had signed up to be an organ
Mhm.
donor, but they don't talk to you about that at all. They're very good about that. One of the things my husband said to them was, "So are you doing the surgery just so you can get the organs?" Like, I mean, because these are the things that go through your mind. And they go, "Oh, no, 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 we can't even talk to you, until she's declared gone, they can't talk to you about organ donation. That's I don't know if that's against the law or if it's just them how they morally handle it. And then what they did was they were waiting to see, like, I'll probably get this wrong because I don't understand all the science of it, but there's a breathing test that they do, and you have to be able to breathe on your own for so many seconds or minutes, and if you don't, then they consider that to be clinically brain dead. So at 5 o'clock that evening, they did it, and they said to us, "She's clinically brain dead. What do you wanna do?" And, I don't ever remember. I mean, and it's hard because her husband was legally the person making the decisions, but he was so awesome because he allowed us to be part of it. So the 3 of us always made all the decisions together. But I don't really remember, people say, "Well, do you remember making the decision to?"
You don't remember much during that time
I
anyway. You
don't.
just don't.
I
Yeah.
don't. I remember going into the bathroom and really what I wanted to do was just go to sleep. I kept thinking about that all day. I wanna sleep.
Mm,
I don't wanna talk with people. I just wanna roll up and sleep on the bathroom floor was cold, and I thought if I could just, stay here.
mm.
So, at that point, once it was decided that there was no coming back from this, we were in a waiting room, and at that point, I don't even know, my husband had gone out to talk to other people, and my 2 brothers were there with me and my son-in-law, and I should say it's part of the during the day, somebody walked by, one of the doctors walked by with one of those red and white coolers,
Mm.
and I freaked out. I said to the doctor, I said to my husband, "Oh, see, they're preparing to take her organs. They're here to get them." And again, the doctor said to me, "No, that's really is his lunch." I mean, so I'm thinking, you see it on TV, they got those coolers and the plane comes in but in my mind, I'm like, "Yep, that's what," and they never thought, like, they were so professional, but your brain goes to
Mm.
50,000,000 places. So when we got into the room, one thing that I did not know, and I wish I had known, was that you have to go through every single organ that your child had, and you have to agree or disagree to allow it to be donated.
I did not know that.
And I wasn't really prepared for that. I remember my brother and my son-in-law crushing my hand because they walked in and they handed my son-in-law her wedding bands, which,
Oh,
here it is his anniversary. And then they have a paper and they go, "Okay, eyes, would you like to donate her eyes? Her heart, would you like to donate her heart?" And they go down through the list, and you don't even have time to be shocked, because you're still in that, "How is this even me? How is this even happening to
mhm.
me or you or, anyone?" And I remember and people go, "Well, how could you?" But I remember they talking about her spine. I'm like, "Oh, no, don't give her back because she had a bad back." Now I'm thinking these doctors must have been going, "Woo!" But I mean, these are the things that, you just, and do you wanna give this? Do you wanna give that? And so they do. You're in there about 40 minutes as they go through.
That's incredible. I didn't realize that that's what happens.
When thinking about it,
Yeah,
though, it does make a lot of sense. I remember reading that there's just so many different religions and cultures that believe that various parts of
exactly.
the body are what contain the soul or the spirit. And so those sorts of things you have to make sure that you're not infringing upon and are not stepping on. Yeah.
Exactly, and, now 17 years out, Colby, that I'm like, "Wow, I'm glad they did it
Hmm.
that way," but I wish, like, almost like, okay, this is I wish there had been someone who said, "This is gonna be the process," but I don't know, how do you train yourself for that? How do you?
Yeah, that is something we had a conversation with someone earlier about how in American culture we don't do enough to prepare for death. We don't talk about it, we
No,
don't
we don't.
discuss it. So when these things do come up, we're not prepared in any sense at all. And it just hits us all at once.
You're right, exactly, exactly, but, after the wonderful thing about organ donation is that afterwards they do, at least here in Maine, they do such a fabulous job. We got a whole book with letters from every one of the people that got an organ, and I was just looking at them the other day to prepare for this and just reminding myself about what those folks had to say. You don't become friends with them. I mean, that's not, that's in the movies and in books. You don't get their real names. I wrote to them, they wrote to me.
So you didn't know who they were by name, but you knew
Right.
what organ they received and
Yes, and like, for example, one of the, folks, his daughter wrote to me, and one thing she said was so wonderful. She said, "How can it be that the worst day of your life would turn out to be the best day of mine?"
wow, that's
And that's powerful.
so
Because she's
powerful.
right, and she got it, she got it. And, her dad was in his 50s. He got 3 of Candace's organs. He had I can't remember what the disease was, but whatever it was, he had been in a wheelchair. He had not been able to go swimming with them. He had not been able to go there were all this list of things that he had not been able to do with his children, but now because of Candace's organs, he was gonna be able to do with his grandchildren, and he was gonna be able to do with his grown children. And so she listed those personal kinds of things out, which to me was much better than knowing, "Oh, okay, so my heart's working at this," and now, it was very, very personal, and it's has stayed with me for 17 years. Like I said, I've never met them, and I don't know that, they need to know, for them, do you wanna know that a 22-year-old died? I mean, I
Mm.
how hard is that? When you get someone's organ, you're so happy, but you also know somebody else is it's a weird thing. It's a weird thing.
Do you think it's fitting that for Candace in her sort of final act, given that she was so involved in service work, could provide, I mean, life for so many others?
Yeah, I think Colby, it's absolutely was the perfect
Yeah.
thing. She was somebody who I remember when she was little, she had a speech impediment, and kids picked on her mercilessly. You know what it's like at school. And, she had gotten off the bus one day, and the bus driver, he was such a sweetheart, and he said, "Oh, no," he goes, "I had to speak to somebody again. They're picking on Miss Candace again." And so I said to her when she got off the bus, she was probably 9, and I said, "I don't know how you do it every day." And she said to me, "Well, I look at it this way, mama. If they're picking on me, they're not picking on someone who can't take it."
Wow.
9, so organ donation was important to her, and even though she was a born again Christian, she was very conservative, but she truly believed in organ donation and giving of herself. So, even though she believed she would be going to heaven, she also wanted to give life to other people. So, yeah, it was very fitting. It was very
Sounds
fitting.
like organ donation really is part of her legacy.
Yes, yes.
And how does it make you feel? Did it bring you peace? Was it unsettling at first?
I don't know that I ever felt unsettled with it, except for that weird part of the red and white lunch bucket,
Right, right.
those kinds of things, that now I look at and I go, "Oh my word." In this journey, if you don't have some sense of humor about things, if you take everything crazy seriously, you're gonna hurt
Mm.
yourself. And so sometimes I look back at that and I chuckle, I do, and I know people say, "Oh, how can you chuckle about that stuff?" With great grief, there's great joy, and, there's always 2 ends, a yin and a yang, or however you look at that, and you just Candace would have cracked up. I know she would have said, "What in the world are you thinking? You probably got a tuna sandwich in there, mom." In the long run, it gave me a lot of hope, as I thought about like, she was not I'm not one of those people that think, "Oh, her heart's in someone else, so she's there because I believe in this a spirit. I don't think she's separate from her organs, but the idea that, as you said, Colby, that the kind of person she was continued on, and that our big thing, and as it is with you guys, is making sure no one ever forgets who my child
Mm.
was.
Mm.
Nobody will forget to say her name. And so that was really the first of it, the first of saying, give to others, do unto others, and that was the first gift.
Tell us how you're doing that. What are the other ways that you're doing to remember Candace?
One of the biggest things that we did, she worked at the Y camp here in Winthrop for many years and had fantastic experiences doing that. She loved working with kids, and we have a lot of her scrapbooks of her with kids. She made friends from all over the world. And so once she passed, a good friend of mine who had lost her husband said, we need to do something. And I'm like, well, how about, we could do a campership. And so we started offering a campership to an 8th grader at Windsor and a 5th grader at Winthrop. And the campership was for kids who and I think I had shared this with you. One of her professors said that Candace was the epitome of what a human should be. And so we ask that teachers look at kids and say, this kid is somebody who's a really good friend to
Mm.
people, who does the right thing when it's not easy to do the right thing, somebody who cares about others and will stand up for those that are bullied. And so for the last, I think it's been 16 years that we've done it, both schools have chosen kids, and my husband's gone to Winthrop to give that award, and I've been able to do it at Winthrop, and I'm friends with a lot of those kids that went to camp on Facebook and get to see, their experiences there. Many of them A couple of them went on to become counselors there. One of them just graduated as a special education teacher this year from Farmington and got his first job. That's exciting to me, as much like what you guys are doing, when you're doing something with young people and then you get to see them, you had a little small piece of that. And every now and then I'll go, yeah, there's Candace, there's a small piece of her in that kid. So that's been delightful. She died on January 10th, which was, as I said, her 6-month wedding anniversary. It was also my mother-in-law's birthday. So it was like, oh my word. So that day we call it a day of kindness. And for the last 17 years, we ask people, and it's been great with Facebook, because before Facebook, you couldn't reach as many people. But with Facebook, which has its pros and its cons, as you and I have talked about, we were able to reach a lot of people. And so we asked people to do one simple act of kindness. And I will say both Winthrop and Windsor have taken that to heart. And it has been a big day at both of those schools where they promote it to parents and to kids, and they go and they do all kinds of activities. And even though they didn't know her, just spending a day being nice to somebody doesn't have to cost you any money just to reach out. So this is the last year for the campership, and we're looking at other ways to do things, and we got to think about that and where we want to go from here now that it's been 17 years, and what do we want to do next?
Well, that's incredible what you've done already.
So I'm curious, in losing your daughter, because it was in 2005, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yep.
almost 20 years now, which is amazing. I mean, it seems like almost yesterday that, 2005, I was, just
I
hanging out
know.
with Cass, and it was a pretty
I was
normal
gonna
summer
say,
day.
yeah,
But
yeah.
in that time, in losing your daughter, have you chosen any ways in which to live your life differently since then? And have you noticed any differences as a whole, small things or big?
Yeah, that's a great question. My life, I feel, is totally, I guess most people wouldn't say it's totally different, but I feel totally different inside. People will say to you, I don't know how you do it. I could never do that. And my sarcastic Irish self wants to say, oh, why? Because you love your kid more than I loved mine?
Right.
That's what comes to my mind. But I know they don't mean it, because they say what they don't know what to say.
Exactly.
And so I say to them now, you have two choices, or I had two choices. I could roll up in a fetal position and never leave my bed and cry, or I could choose to live in joy. And I chose joy. And I choose joy every single day. And it is not easy. Sometimes you wake up and you do not want to wake up, and you do not want to choose joy, and you do not want to go ahead. I remember the first time after she died, it was like 2 days later, and I hadn't eaten, and someone said, "You have to eat." And my husband made scrambled eggs, and I took a bite of the eggs, and I cried like a baby, and he said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "They taste so amazing." And the problem was, in my head, I should not be happy about scrambled eggs. My child is dead. I should not like scrambled eggs. I can never watch Seinfeld again. I can't sing in the car, even though I don't sing well. But I say to people early in their grief, you will sing in the car again. I can't guarantee you'll be any better at it than you were before, but you will find yourself singing Don't Stop Believing at some point. You will. And I wish someone had told me that. I just wanted someone to say to me, you will survive this. Your life will be different, but you will know joy. You will know happiness. You will know love again, because you're living for two people now. You're not just living for you, and you're living for your child. So, do you live for your child in anger and grief and tragedy, or do you live in adventure and joy and in its struggle? What do you decide? And as any parent or sibling will tell you, that's really not a choice. I'm not going. I'm going to choose the one in bed? I don't think so.
I do like how you said that you wake up though and you choose joy. There's a quote from John Izzo, who's a PhD and author, and it's I might be paraphrasing a little bit, but it's we cannot choose with which we will receive love, but we can choose to be love.
Yeah.
And at any moment, it's you have a conscious choice to sort of just let yourself be true to the moment and to give a kind word or a smile or a hug to somebody who you might not even know needs it in that day or in that passing, or even just a moment to feel contentment for your day and the place in which you're sitting and just to enjoy what's around you. I think sometimes so many people think that if I just lived in a different area, or if I just had a better job, or like there's something or someone that has to give them that ability to feel joy or
Right.
happiness or love,
Right.
as opposed to coming from within.
The only one, like that can give that to you, as you said, is yourself. I think that's what happens when you read these statistics. People will tell you, oh, marriages break up more when you lose a child. That's baloney.
That's not true, actually.
And people will be like that and they'll say, oh, well, you and Walter stayed together. Well, you know why? Because he's the only other living human who knows exactly what I feel like. He's the only other parent she had. He grieves very differently than I do. And I think that's the issue, is that women expect men to grieve like they do. And again, I don't mean to be sexist, but many men grieve in a very different way than women grieve. Women are talkers. Women, share. Many men were not taught, and I think it's better for your age group, Colby. I'm not sure, but I see my grandson who's 21. He's very different than his father or my husband, because my husband was born in 55.
It's a different generation.
Whole different
Right,
story,
right.
whole different story.
Mhm.
So I think we're becoming better at letting our men feel what they need to feel.
And teach them that it's okay to do that.
Right.
And as spouses, and I don't care whether, it's two women spouses or two men spouses, or, what your dynamics of your family is, to allow the other person to grieve in the way that that person needs to grieve.
Absolutely.
And as a parent, to allow Colby to grieve the way he needs to grieve, and Colby allow you to grieve the way you need to grieve. It's
Right.
all different. It's all different.
Mhm.
And because we all had a different relationship with the child that we lost.
Mhm.
So, of course, that grieving is going to be different.
Yeah, absolutely.
You and I talked a little bit about this. Do you feel responsible in any way? Do you have guilt? Do you carry guilt over this accident that it happened to Candace, that it happened to your family?
The guilt is something that I didn't expect to be as hard as it was,
Mm-hmm.
because I wasn't there, but I blame myself because I said, well, she wasn't a very good driver. She'd been in a couple of car accidents before, but this was Candace. She'd be driving, she had her mind on 40 million things. So in my head, I'm like, well, if you'd been a better driving instructor, or if you had never moved to Winthrop and she had never gone to UMF, and she would never have become a social worker, and it gets crazy that way. But I think my biggest guilt was I looked back on every little thing I did as a parent and decided that I was horrible. That every time I had yelled at her or grounded her or lost my frustration with her, for a long time, I couldn't remember when I was good. I just kept thinking, oh, you were so horrible. You always were just so frustrated. And finally, someone said to me, you talk a lot about, oh, what a horrible mother you were. How did she turn out to be the kid she did if you were so horrible? And that just was like water in my face. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I saying here? Why do all four of my children have a great relationship? Why do they all go to college? Why did they all, they're all really amazing, giving people. How bad could you have been?
You did something right.
Right.
But I think that's what you do. That's where your brain goes. And it's hard because some people, and you and I talked about this a little bit, and I'm just so grateful in some sense that I didn't have Facebook when she died, because I've seen people post horrific things, like if a baby dies in a pool, well, where was that parent and why wasn't they watching them? And, I can just see someone going, well, didn't her parents tell her not to drive in the snow? You can just, because people don't want to believe it can happen to them. So they want to blame you as a parent.
Someone. They want to blame someone.
Right.
I think that's, that guilt is so natural, but I don't think we expect it. We are tough on ourselves. We are very tough on ourselves.
Absolutely. Curious to know how your grown children now remember Candace. because they're now adults and
Yeah, yeah. So my oldest daughter is in her mid 40s. But she has two children. They live in Memphis, um, and she's a teacher, and she does a lot talking to her friends about Candace. And when we do things this year, we bought lunch for her whole team on Candace's birthday. And so all the teachers came in and we had gotta have barbecue ribs in the South. So, we had all these ribs. And so she had an opportunity to talk about Candace and what Candace does. So it's kinda neat when I go there that all these folks know who she is. My second daughter is a nurse, and she's done a lot on Facebook raising money for the camp and that kind of thing.
nice.
My youngest son was her Irish twin. They were 364 days apart. They were in the same grade, and he would always say, "Hi, I'm Walter. This is my sister Candace. No, we're not twins. I'm older." And we just happen to be in the same grade. And he runs his own snowmobile business, Judge Gear, and tells his children about her. So all the grandchildren know who she is, even though the first two were born. Annie, who is 17, was born the year she died. And so it's keeping her alive within their children. There's pictures of Candace in all of their houses. They recognize her. We have a birthday party every year for her. They come. But it's been hard on them. It's been harder than I realized.
Yeah, certainly losing a sibling is not easy. And although time makes those things more tolerable
Yes.
and easier to manage, it looms over you at all times. And even though sometimes it's more in the distance, every once in a while it does come back and it's right over your head again.
Yeah.
And I'm sure though that they're very thankful to have each other still.
I was gonna say that, Colby, for you, that you're by yourself. I mean, you have mom and dad, obviously. They do have each other to talk with about
Right.
that. And grief is a lonely, lonely journey, even when you have other people with you. But it does help to have someone who remembers, like you said earlier, playing in the sun.
Right.
Somebody has that
Hmm.
memory that you have. And even if they don't, they can recreate it in their brain, like, oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah, I'm fortunate enough though that I have so many friends that have sort of crossed over that barrier to become family.
that's awesome.
You mentioned a couple of things in our conversation, but are there any other things that you'd like to share with newly bereaved parents? They're just starting this grief journey.
I think what I would say to them is, like I said, you will survive it and you have a choice, and it's not an easy one. But, I think what Colby said about it getting more tolerable, there will be a point where you don't wake up every single day feeling like you're going to be sick, that you will be able to sleep at night. I dream about her a lot. Usually she's always little when she comes to me in her dreams.
Hmm.
First, when she came, they were horrific because it was always her saying, well, I got to go back now, or you got to save me. And
Oh my gosh,
it was
that's
awful. I had one that has stayed with me forever, mom. And now it's more natural, like she's there, but always little. And I think it's because that's when I felt I had control of her. Once you become an adult, as parents, we don't have that control, but as little, maybe that's what it is. But I think that new grieving parents need to reach out to people and allow people to do for them.
Hmm.
Allow them in, and be very clear about what you can handle and what you can't. I did not want to talk to anybody on the phone, and I would do it, and then I would feel like, oh, I wish, I didn't really want to do it. And I think it's okay to say, this is what I can handle right now.
yeah, know your boundaries, or at
Mhm.
least have the person that can express that for
Right,
you.
right. Someone who's gonna be your shield and say, "Oh, she can't
Mhm.
do that right now."
Mhm.
And that nobody can tell you how to grieve. Unfortunately, many, many people I have met, I guess fortunate or unfortunately over the years, probably 60 who I talk to, and they always say, "I see your pictures on Facebook," or "I see how you're doing," and that's Facebook. That's not reality. Yeah,
Right.
I'm in Alaska having a good time, but I might have had a nightmare that night.
Mhm.
I'm not posting that on Facebook. If you wanna talk to me message-wise, we'll talk about that. So don't get tied up in, this is a journey that goes like this. It's not, it's
It's
waves.
not linear.
It's
Mhm.
not, it's waves. You're gonna swim out, sometimes that wave's gonna take you under, and sometimes there's so much joy in riding that wave that you ride it all the way to the end. So,
Mm.
you just gotta be prepared, and it's okay to walk out of places, it's okay to tell people what you need, and I guess know that you're gonna survive it. You don't think you will, but you will. You will. And there are people out there, especially with Facebook now and with groups, and there's lots of good literature out there, more and more every day.
Facebook, that's how we met, right?
Right. Right.
I'm still surprised, really, by the intensity of my own sadness and despair. It's been almost 8 years, and it really hasn't gotten easier, but it has changed.
Yeah.
And I'm still learning how to live with that,
Yeah.
how to live with your grief, walk beside it, and not walk against it.
Yeah, I think, again, I don't know, like, we kinda say to ourselves, "Oh, 8 years, this is where I should be." And it's so not that. It's so not
I've
that.
never felt that way, I have to say. I've never felt like I need to feel
Good,
anyway.
good.
Some of that is just because I've had some really supportive people
That's
to help
huge.
me through that process. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what I find, I think the more that I talk with others and I search out, my sister has a great quote that she said to me. From now on, we are never going to say no to fun. That's our mantra. So if I call you and I say, hey, let's go for an ice cream, we're not saying no to fun. We're going. And I don't always, but I find myself saying yes more and more. And then I get there and I've had a good time. And that's a struggle. That's a hill to climb, but searching for those moments that are going to kind of put a bandage over that pain. Pain's still there, but at least I'm not home in my chair staring, which I did plenty of.
I think that's great. That's great advice. But also give yourself some grace when you can't do something. To say,
Absolutely.
I just can't.
Not doing it.
Right.
Yeah.
One final question. We always like to give our guests the opportunity to share. How would you like the world to remember Candace?
I would like them to remember that she always saw people as being really special and that every person deserved to be loved and cared for, whether they were popular or not, whether they were wealthy or not, whether they had AIDS or not, did not matter. Every human has that right to be treated like a queen or a king, to be a princess, to be loved, to be unequivocally cared for. And she tried in those 22 years to do that. I often say she lived 75 years in 22 years. And I hear that a lot from people who have lost children, that they feel like their children had great wisdom for their age, or they did things that were just altruistic and different than what many kids do. And I think if we can all live like that even if it's one person, as Colby was saying earlier, if you just go up and give one person if it's the waitress and you say, you did a great job today. How hard is that for us to say that? And I think Candace has reminded me of that. And I try every day to live that way. Not always successful. It's a good goal to have.
Well, I wish that I could have known Candace. I feel like I do in many ways, just talking with you. And we've read about her and have followed you. And so we're really grateful that you've been here today to celebrate her life and remind people to live her legacy of kindness.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And I think you're going to inspire a lot of people to approach their grief with a level of compassion for themselves already, approaching that journey, but also with some insightful tips and ideas about how you can work through that and make conscious and day-to-day decisions in order to better yourself through the process.
Thank you, Colby.
Well, thank you.
And I just want to thank both of you. I mean, this is not an easy thing to do. And I got to say, I think it is so cool that it's a mom and son thing. It just makes my heart happy.
Well, great. Thank you.
We appreciate that. And thanks for being here.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
As long as you love.
Thank you so much for listening. If you found this podcast helpful, please share our link with others and subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. I'm Monica Charette, reminding you that you are never alone in your grief. Until next time, we'll be right here with you, holding the light.
As long as you love.
As long as you love.